What's up, friends? The latest Balance Dataslate has hit 40K, so this is the perfect time to go back and take a look at the previous Dataslate. We have 8 weeks of data to review, so sit back, relax, and let's get to it. This is going to be a shorter video. We're just going to review the last 8 weeks of the tournament results from the previous Dataslate. We're going to take a look at the winners and losers of the Dataslate, the people who came out on top in all the major categories. And we're going to look at overall army balance versus dominating armies. Just as a reminder, if you find this video helpful or useful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel to get all of my latest videos. I'll be doing a new one later this week when the tournament results for the first week of the new Dataslate have been posted. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is look at the player numbers for this Dataslate. We had 8 weeks of data, so we had total number of players was almost 6,500, games played was almost 34,000, and the total number of tournaments was 134. First, we're going to look at the win percentage by army. So this is the last 8 weeks. We have the win percentage shown for each army over the last Dataslate. Genestealer cults dominated Dataslate at the highest win percentage at almost 60%, which is 8% above the next closest, which is the Astra Militarum. Space Marines, Dark Angels, and Grey Knights, they struggled down at the bottom with a sub 45% win rate, which was the lowest of all of them. And taking a look overall, we had over 84% of the total armies within that GW acceptable win rate of 45 to 55%. So except for the few outliers, and even the ones in the low end of the spectrum are just below, so with a little help they can be brought back up. The Genestealer cults definitely did run away with it a little bit too much and need to be reined in a little bit. 60% is pretty high. It's not the most egregious we've seen over any of the previous Dataslates, but is the highest of this one, so it definitely needs some looking at. Next up, we have army representation. So this is a percentage of the player base. So for the top armies in here, we had Astra Militarum and Necrons, both sitting at just over 7%. That's a lot of representation. The average is about 3.8%, so they were almost double the average representation. Next up, you had Tyranids at 6.4%, and then you had sitting around 5%, which is Chaos Space Marines and Tau. Overall, we had 3 armies that seemed to show up to the tables more than most, with the Guard, Necrons, and Tyranids, which is pretty common for Tyranids and Necrons. They're very popular armies. Guard definitely was climbing every week due to their success rate in tournament wins. And then down the bottom, we had Imperial Agents, usual suspect. Black Templars, also a usual suspect for representation. They're not a very popular army. Sometimes they are very successful, but that's not the moment right now, so it's not unusual to see them down at the bottom. And then we had the Adeptus Mechanicus, which is another staple of the low representation. Just difficult army to play, not having much success right now, and they're very expensive to own and difficult to paint. So all those things add up to make it kind of a low representation army for the most part. Now we have the percentage of players who went X-0 and X1, so anyone who didn't lose in a tournament or only lost one game. Genestealer cults, they made it look really easy last Dataslate with over 30% of their all players going X0 or X1. So that means basically one in every third player didn't lose or only lost one game during a tournament, which is kind of crazy to think, because seeing how the average is around 15%, so they were double that. So there's definitely some adjusting that needs to be done, and with the new Dataslate that just came out, hopefully we'll see that brought down in line. Guard was the next with 21.5%, still high, but not like too high. It definitely needs a little toning down, but overall not too bad. And then the rest of the armies are all within 4 to 5% of the average, which is really good to see. So no army severely struggled. And down at the bottom, we do see Grey Knights and Space Marines, which is, they're at 10%, which is, 5% roughly below the average. It's not great, but it's just within that, okay, it's kind of acceptable. So overall, I think the balance is pretty good when it comes to players performing well at tournaments. We definitely had some armies doing better, some armies doing worse, but besides the 2 outliers of Genestealers and Guard, most armies were doing pretty well. So next thing we're going to look at is the army tournament wins. This is a week-by-week chart, so it shows the total number of tournaments they won, and then the different colors of the bars represent each week. So at the top there we had Astra Militarum, and we have Genestealer cults coming in at 18 wins apiece, which is I think over 25% of all tournaments. So they definitely dominated and winning most of the time. 1 in 4 tournaments is being won by one of these 2 armies. But other than that, if you look through the rest of the chart, everything is looking pretty average. We have a span from majority of them fall between 3 and 7 tournament wins, which is not too bad. That's a good representation across the board. Down at the bottom, we do have Adeptus Mechanicus, with just 1 tournament win. We don't include Imperial Agents. They're too new. They're not really fully fleshed out yet, so I'm not expecting to see them win any tournaments soon. But Adeptus Mechanicus, definitely the loser of this data slate, only 1 win. So if we did pull some of those 18 wins from Guard and Genestealers and we sort of redistributed across all the armies, I think we'd be in a pretty good spot. The last thing we're going to look at is the meta health rating for the last 8 weeks. So the meta health rating compares each army's results against the average across all armies. So if you take an army's win percentage and compare it against the average win percentage, if theirs is better, then that adds a little to their score. If theirs is worse, that removes a little to their score. And we compare win percentage, army rep, XOX1, and tournament wins. All 4 of those combined, compared against all the individual averages, gives you your score. So the bars in blue is the army score, and the area in green is the average. So anything that sticks above that green is doing above average in most of the categories, and anything below is doing below average. Now, we do have most armies falling in that below average range, but that is because we have 2 armies on the top end who are just blowing everything out of the water, with Guard and Genestealers doing 40 and 50% better than the average. On the low ends, we do have only 2 armies below 80%, so the low end is not as low as the high end, which is good to see, because that means we can sort of, if we pull back, or if those Guard and Genestealers get pulled back a bit, and their wins and their tournament wins and all that get sort of pulled back into the general distribution, everything else should be brought back up, and we'll see more sitting right around that 100 mark, which is what we want to see. Most armies fall within the plus or minus 10% of the average, which is 100. So, overall, when you combine and look at everything, it's a pretty balanced data slate, except for the few outliers on the top and a few outliers on the bottom, which is going to happen for most. Hopefully the new data slate can sort of adjust those and bring everything a little bit closer to average. And that's it. So overall, let's take a quick review here. Overall, the balance is pretty good. Most armies are falling in with the acceptable ranges in all the major categories. We do have outliers, and it's the same usual suspects in all the categories. Guard and Genestealers are usually at the top, and then we have Astra Militarum and Imperial Agents down at the bottom. Tournament wins were fairly spread, except for, of course, Genestealer and Guard again. If we have a few changes to those dominating armies, we can see a much more balanced data slate when I do this the next time. So hopefully there'll be some changes and we can sort of bring everything down in line. It's also going to be interesting to look ahead to see how the new Grotmus detachments shake up the meta. Every army gets a new detachment. We're seeing a lot of really good and a lot of pretty okay ones, so it's going to be interesting to see how those get utilized. I'm thinking after about 4 or 5 weeks of them being released, I'll put out a video that will show how each of the new Grotmus armies are doing, and we can take a look at see the winners and losers from Grotmus to see which armies are succeeding and which armies are failing, and then we can get an idea, maybe do that month over month just to see how that has been implemented and what we can look forward to, or maybe they can improve upon next year or next time they do something like this. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Just another quick reminder, if you find this video useful or helpful, please don't be afraid to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps support me, support the channel. I'll be putting out a new video every week for the previous tournament results. I should have one coming hopefully in the next day or two once we get the numbers in. I appreciate all your support, and we'll see you next time. Thanks guys.